If you've got a second, just say hello, maybe introduce yourself. This is the introductory part of the meetup, and we'll be getting started pretty shortly. It's always good to hear from everyone. I'm VJ, I'm your organizer, by the way, for JavaScriptLA. So I'll go ahead and just kind of let people kind of come through. Basically, we will have our meetup pretty shortly. Mark is already here. Like I said, this is the introductory hour. And so our introductory period, and basically, we just kind of talk about the group, let people network because we don't have physical meetups at the moment. And so, this is like your chance to kind of like get to know some of the people behind the community, as well as, make some friends, introduce yourself. If you have any questions about this group or where to find us, this is the main website, javascriptla.net. So you'll want to go here. We have meetups pretty much, I would say once a month, but we are doing more than that lately. We're actually doing another meetup this month, and this will be next week, and this will be from our friends at Kintone. So you'll want to definitely check this one out after today. In the meantime, like I said, I'll be kind of admitting people in. If you have, any questions about like learning JavaScript, or you want to get better at those things, I do recommend supporting the group and purchasing some of the courses we offer. There's one on Udemy where you can learn ES6, which is pretty cool. I'll put a link for that in the chat. This one is by me. And so this will help you with pretty much like 6 hours of guided, instruction, which is pretty cool. And then we do have a YouTube channel where all of the videos go up after the meetup. So if you go to youtube.com/JavaScriptLA and you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can see all of the past meetups that we've done so far. So this is a good way to just kind of refresh and see, like what did you learn during the last meetup, and if you forgot something, it's a good way to kind of just get back into it. I do that quite a lot. In fact, I was really into MongoDB, which I had been learning for a while, and this tutorial really helped me out, especially with work. So like I said, I encourage people to go ahead and just kind of introduce themselves. If you're shy, and I understand that, then you can also do your chat. And I think the chat is somewhere in here. I think there's a little chat button. Actually, maybe if I stop sharing my screen, I could probably see it. Let's see here. Oh, here it is, the chat. Okay. So yeah, if you feel like chatting, that's totally fine too. I know some people, again, are camera shy. And I'm also going to give a few more minutes to Mark because we are still a little bit early. It is 9:57 right now. So if you are, just coming in, like I said, feel free to chat, feel free to talk amongst yourselves, and we will get started shortly.
Oh, I'm here, VJ. I want you to know that I'm here. I'm ready to rock. So,
all right.
We are in the building. But we can give people a few minutes to come and hang out. I know it's a Saturday morning and it's early, especially for you West Coast folks. It's pretty early in the morning, so I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah, some people might be making coffee and, kind of like rolling out of bed, brushing your teeth, whatever it is. There's a familiar face. Hey, Blake, how are you? Looks like he's signing in.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Good to see you.
Likewise.
Thanks for joining us.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Hey, Blake, while you're out there, why don't you introduce yourself to the meetup group? Could be a good icebreaker.
Sure. I'm Blake, and I used to be a tech recruiter, and which I originally started with the goal of getting into hands-on tech stuff. And after talking with devs all day for many years. Ultimately decided to take the leap and quit my job, and I've been self-teaching programming for the last couple of years, and was just starting to apply when the pandemic hit. So now I don't know. We'll see what happens.
How's that going for you? I mean, like, are you kind of applying, you know, and doing videos online, interviews online? Is that kind of the...
When I was applying, I was having decent luck. I was getting some bites, but through the interview process, kind of discovered a lot of gaps in my knowledge that I thought would be beneficial to try and fill. So I've been kind of backing off from being active on the job hunt and more hunkering down and trying to kind of get a few more pieces in my knowledge before I go back at it. Plus the market for junior devs, from what I can tell right now, is pretty sparse, and so I don't think that's really the best use of my time. I'm kind of waiting to see what happens in a few months. Hopefully hiring picks back up.
Yeah, for sure. Let's touch base afterwards. You know, maybe kind of talk about, like, you know, some strategies and stuff like that. You know, I'd love to kind of just help you out, because, you know, I've also been doing the challenge questions as well, and so, like, you know, I want to also get better at those things too.
Yeah. Cool.
So,
sounds good.
Yeah. All right. If anybody else out there wants to introduce themselves, you know, this is the time to do that right now. You can, like I said, you can do it in the chat, or you can do it if you want to unmute yourself. Icebreaker is always cool because, you know, you get to meet people, especially from around the world now, essentially. We have so many people tuning in outside of LA and Orange County, which is where we originally started. Here's Angie. Hello, everyone. That was in the chat, by the way.
Jamal in the building. What's up? Let's go.
What's up, Mark? Hey, everybody. I'm not in LA, but came to support my boy do this talk. So far, so good.
Welcome, Jamal. Thanks for coming.
And yes, it's very early on the West Coast.
Yeah, 10 o'clock is, you know, kind of asking a lot out of us West Coasters. You know, a lot of people like wake up at 10, especially in the easy way of California out here. But it's okay. This is good for you. Actually, I was gonna ask, is anybody on, like, you know, Hawaiian schedule now because of, you know, COVID? I know, like, I have completely lost track of time as a result of, you know, all the changes and everything. So yeah, just looks like we got some stuff in the chat here. It says, hello everyone, looking forward to the talk. This is from Stephen Dahl. And then we have Angie, I'm still in pajamas, don't judge me. No judgment at all. We have Blake, morning here and all. We also have some more people coming in. We have Thomas and Minko just came in. It's pretty cool. As I said before, you know, and I'll probably keep repeating this as people are coming in, probably hearing me for the first time. If you're new, feel free to just shout out, like, unmute yourself. This is the time to do it now. Like, just basically tell us who you are, where you're located, and what you're interested in, why this talk might be interesting to you, and what else you hope to get out of this community group.
Yeah, I'm over in Burbank, and I'm starting to make my way into the JavaScript industry. So I'm just kind of checking out this meeting. I haven't worked in web development, but just starting to get into it now.
Now's the time. What in particular excites you about web development, or got you into it, I guess? Like, why do you want to get into it?
Oh, there we go. Just started my video.
Hey,
I love working from home. I love coding. You know, I've always been into it. but I've been working in motion graphics in the film industry for some time, and now I'm just starting to get into JavaScript. I've heard good things about it, so I just maybe doing motion design for like web and that type of stuff. So, but
yeah, definitely. I said just about me too. Like I came from that industry. Well, I didn't do motion graphics, but I was around a lot of motion graphic designers and also a lot of designers. I worked in Los Angeles, Hollywood area for a long time. That was actually how I became a web developer. And so during that time, the people who were coding were using Flash as opposed to JavaScript. And then I was the new guy who was learning JavaScript and using that at work. So I think you'll find it fun, especially if you're coming from that side. Like there's a lot of opportunity to be creative. So
yeah, it's Adobe. They changed it to Adobe Animate now, Flash.
Yeah, that's correct.
And they use it for like animation, like stop animation, still frame animation. But it's kind of died out. And I know the coding language is pretty much dead now. It's Adobe Flash, but
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. I guess if anybody else has anything they want to say, just let me know. It is currently 10:05. Mark, how are you on time? Would you like to get started early or technically on time?
I'm so flexible. So if you folks want to give people a couple more minutes, but if we think we're ready to get started, VJ, I'm going to trust your judgment because I'm ready. I'm ready for action. So you let me know when you're ready.
Okay. I think we might as well go ahead and get started. I think 10:05 is pretty much on time. So let's go ahead and just dive in. And then if anybody, I guess, coming in has questions about whatever is being shown on screen or what Mark is saying, or maybe what I've said, feel free to use the chat. I see a lot of people doing that at the moment. Afterwards, we'll also have another discussion panel if you like, and we can also continue doing networking. And then we'll also, ask Mark some questions, a lot more questions. So, you cool with that, Mark?
You know it. I am so cool with that.
All right. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Let's go.
Right. Okay, everybody. I am so pumped up to be here. First and foremost, good morning, good afternoon, hello from wherever you're coming from. I'm so grateful that you will spend your Saturday with me and spend some time with us here at JavaScriptLA. So this is phenomenal. Also, huge thank you to VJ for connecting and making this happen. Thank you for inviting me. I am so pumped up to be here. Let's go. Let's go. It's so exciting. All right. Let me just share my screen and then we're going to just get everything rolling. All right, if you can see my slides right now, I want you to start snapping right now. Just give me some snaps. Let me know if you can see these crisp slides. Listen, I used the formula for these slides. My great-great-grandmother told me what the design should be for these. And so, we're going to be honoring her with these slides. I'm just kidding. Good morning, folks. Good afternoon. Good evening to everyone here. Thank you so much for coming. Today's talk is called Angular and the Supercharged CLI. A little bit about myself. Well, I'm a developer advocate at Google, and I work on the Angular team. Here are two things that I absolutely love. I love to code, and I love to teach. And I'll tell you, though, my dream job is to be a hand model. So don't be surprised if you see these amazing hands in an ad campaign coming soon. Don't doubt me because I can do anything. So this talk is going to be based on Angular. So let's understand what Angular is. Well, Angular is a platform for building scalable applications. And when I say scalable, we're thinking about as you build your apps, this is what your workflow usually is. You add a feature, and then if that one works, you do what? You add another feature, and you add another feature, and then you need to scale your application up. Well, Angular platform is a tool that scales with you as your application grows. the application framework platform scales with you. Now, if you've done any JavaScript or any programming at all, you're probably asking yourself, well, why Angular when there are so many other options out there? Well, let's dive into that. First, there's the integrated tooling. One of the things that I really love about Angular is that way in the beginning, when TypeScript was first released, we were one of the first tools to integrate it from the jump. We actually partnered with Microsoft to make that happen. Then we have really nice integration with IDEs and editors to make your developer productivity and your developer velocity go really smoothly. And then there are also other tools like the CLI that we'll talk about today that really are aimed to help make you have a really great development experience. Then let's talk about best practices. You'll hear this term a lot, that Angular is opinionated. And when we say opinionated, here's what we really mean. It's batteries included. We want you to not have to make so many decisions on the jump to get started developing your next great project. One thing is, consider the router, for example. You don't have to go and find a router. We have a great, powerful router built into Angular that you can use right out of the box. But here's where things get really great. If you don't want to use that router because maybe you have a need that exceeds what's provided, you can swap out those batteries. You can build your own router or find another one if you felt like you had that use case or that need. Then the power of community. So Angular we build Angular together, meaning we work in public on GitHub and we create pull requests, submit them just like you do. And the community also builds Angular. You all submit pull requests and those get integrated into the platform all the time. So Angular itself, so these are three really compelling reasons why we think you should consider Angular when you're going to build your next program. I want to show you something. You see this? This is my kid. I call him the heir because he's the heir to the Thompson billionaire fortune that is still in progress. We're not quite there yet, but it's in progress. But this is the heir. And this kid is really interesting because he just turned 3. And then he said something to me the other day. He said, "Hey, Dad, can you make a cool app for finding friends?" And I'm like, "But you're only 3 years old. How do you know what that is?" But, you know, that's what he did. That's the heir for you. And so I thought about it, and then I came up with an idea of something that we can build together today. And that's an app called Kindler, right? It's a brand new friending app. It's a way for you to find new friends. And we're going to build this with a little bit of help from the CLI. Now, looking at this UI, you might say, well, how would you even approach something like this with Angular? What would be your technique to solving this problem? Well, let's break it down. We're going to use components, which are the basic UI building blocks in an Angular application. So when you build with Angular, components are going to be the things that end up showing on your screen, your HTML structure, the things that you see. And here's what components are made of. You have TypeScript, CSS, and HTML. Those are the 3 ingredients into the recipe to build out your components. Now, looking back at this app, well, let's look at what components we can call out. If I were looking at this, I would probably look at the giant component that goes all the way around the application as one component, right? Like a container, maybe your whole kind of parent, okay? Then you probably break it down and say, well, I see one side, which is a friends list. Then I see another side, which is a list of messages. So then that's 2 more components. So far we have 3. We have the app, the friends list, and then the messages. So you could stop right here and just say, yeah, let's just display it just as is. But I think we can do a little bit better because components help you build in hierarchy for your application. So you can build some really nice structure that keeps things really maintainable. When I say maintainable is I don't think I should update the friends list just to update the friend profile photo. I shouldn't really have to update the whole list. Those are kind of separate concerns. So here's what we'll do to solve that. We're going to make another component just for the friend, just one component for that, and we'll reuse it, and then one component for the message right there, and then we'll reuse that one. Okay, friends, we are cooking with fire. I hope, okay, look, get that left hand up real quick if you can. And you see this? That was me just giving you a high five because I'm so excited about what we're about to do. All right, so we're going to jump into this, and we're going to get some help from the supercharged CLI. But you might have been asking yourself, well, Mark, you've been saying this term a lot. I don't know what you're talking about. What is a CLI? Don't worry. I care about you. I got you. A CLI is a command line interface. And this is just an application or tool that lives in your computer's terminal that you can issue commands and actions to do things. And CLIs are very, very popular and powerful. One, they're so popular, even GitHub has a great, great CLI. They just released 1.0 this week of the GitHub CLI, for example. Firebase has a CLI, and lots of tools have command line interfaces that you can use. To install the CLI, here's what you're going to need. We're going to run this command, but you'll either need npm or yarn. So one of the two major package managers, right? And you're going to do an install. We're going to install it globally, and this is the name of our package that we're going to install. Now, the reason we're going to install this globally is because we want to be able to use the CLI from anywhere in our terminal. All right, so you can go to any folder and be able to use it. So that's why we're going to do this globally. Here's what you're going to get once you've installed that CLI. You're going to get access to this format where you have ng, which is just a convention that we use for Angular. So ANG, see that? So ng, you have your ng, and then whatever command that you want to issue. So with this command, you could say things to help boost your productivity as you're building your app. And we're going to look at some commands that are going to make you say, wow, I'm so glad this thing exists. I have to build a new Angular app soon. The first command we're going to use is ng-new, and then we're going to say the name of our app. So I've already done that, and let me show you what that looks like. So I've created this. This is a fresh app created already, and then you can see it gives us some structure already set up for us. By the way, as an editor, I'm using VS Code, which is one of the many IDEs that we have, that integrated tooling I was talking about. So I'm using VS Code here. Under our source folder, we have our app. So all of this was kind of created just from using ng-new. You might say, Mark, that's cool, but what else? Show me something I don't know. Let's keep going. I'm going to go into my terminal. Okay, we're in our folder for our app. I want to see what this app looks like that was just built out of the box. I want to see what it looks like. Let's jump in. We do ng-serve. Now, ng-serve is going to launch the integrated web server that's going to host your app locally so you can see your changes in real time. And because of the way that this thing is packaged up with all the tools we're using, you're also going to get a hot refresh. So when you save, it's going to refresh that screen for you. Okay, so it looks like it's running. Here's how you can tell when you're ready to go. It says open your browser to 4200. So localhost 4200. So if we got that set up, I already have that set up for us. So if we go here, let me zoom in for us. Okay, so this is the default web app that gets built when you do ng-new. This is what comes out of the box. It has some information for you, and it kind of gives you some next steps. If you're not sure what to do, tells you how to keep going. All right. If we look at the code for this component, so remember I said our component we're built up of certain things. Well, you have your component, you have your TypeScript, your HTML, your CSS. This is a spec.tf. This is your test, right? So we also give you some tests to start out with if you're interested for that. Okay, so we have you back on that one. All right, but here's what I'm really interested in. You see this? This is the code that was already dynamically generated for you. We're going to drop that out of there. And I'm going to do what every developer is dying to see. Hello world, because you don't believe me. You don't believe that I just made this right now. Okay, there we go. Hello world. I didn't hit refresh. I just went back to the screen and then it showed. All right. You probably want something like this. So we're going to make this. We'll say this is our main component. And then we'll have an H1. We'll say Kindler. And then we'll put in this nice crispy fire emoji. We'll save it. Okay, it looks okay, but I think we can style this up a little bit better. So here's the two steps we're going to take. To save us some time, I already have some stuff set up for us. Let me comment these out for a sec. So I already have a template set up for us. Now I'm going to go into the styles and apply the styles that we need. These are the styles that we need. So I want to apply the app styles. Okay. And there's one more style that I'll apply. And this is up to the developer. I like to use a CSS reset to just keep my styles, because the browser gives you default styles. I like to add a CSS reset to remove those default styles so that I'm in more control of everything that's added to my screen. So let me add in my default styles here. Okay, so now with that being said, now we're cooking. Look at this. I can get some venture capital money off of this so far. They'll see this banner and they'll say, look, are you in round A or C round? What are you doing? Okay, so now we're cooking with some gas. This is exciting. So let's go back to our app component. If we look at our screen, we're working on this part. So now we've already set up the banner and then that header. But you probably want to set up the friends. So how will we set up that friends list? Well, let's do that together. Here's where the powerful CLI is going to help us once again. So I'm going to leave the ng-serve running in the background so that way it's not interrupted. But I'm going to work in a new terminal so I can run those commands. Remember, you do ng, and here's another powerful command. So you've already known about new and serve. Here is generate. Generate helps you build the different parts of your application in Angular. And it's going to set up some scaffolding for you. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'll say generate. Well, I want a component because remember we said these are all components. Remember we said 5 components. Can I get you give me number 5? Because we said 5 components. All right, if you held your hand up, I like that. While it's still up, bam, a high five again for you. So let's do the friends list component. So I'm going to generate, I'm going to call it friends list. Okay, so it generated 4 files, our CSS, our HTML, our test, and then our TypeScript. Now, here's where some of the integration I've told you about. If you notice, I haven't left this window. I haven't gone anywhere. But because of the integration, it knows what friends list is. I didn't refresh anything. It knows what friends list is. I'm going to go to the definition of friends list. This is what was built by the supercharged CLI. Okay. The reason I'm so excited is because if you think about other ways to build components, you usually have to do all this stuff by hand. I'm just running commands right now and just getting the party started. So I'm going to go into the HTML. We got friends list works. Okay, so let's make sure that that's in there. Let's go back to our component and let's make sure that everything is there. Let's save it. And then we need to go back to our, let's make sure this component is saved. Okay, there we go. Always make sure you save all your files. Especially the folks who are new to development, this will happen to even professionals. Make sure you save all your files. All right, so our friends list is working. Let's jump into the component TypeScript, so the component class that we have. This is all TypeScript. So TypeScript is a subset of JavaScript. So a lot of the things that you will write in TypeScript are going to look very familiar. And some of these things will be features that you can implement directly into JavaScript, but some of them will be features that are maybe not either implemented in JavaScript yet, or they might be TypeScript specific. But TypeScript gives you the power of what we call strong types. What that means is a little bit beyond the scope of this talk, but I definitely encourage you to check out TypeScript. A lot of companies use it. There's a lot of value there. Okay, so if we're going to be in a friends list, we probably need a list of friends. Would you agree to that? Give me a thumbs up if you agree. We need a list of friends. Okay, let's do that then. So we have our friends list. Okay, so we got Jamal, Angie, Wesley, Denny in the building. Look at that, feeling good, feeling great. All right, so this is an array it's an array of objects. Each object has 2 properties in it. Okay, 2 properties in it, which is the name and then the photo for that friend. If we go to the HTML, here's what we want to do. Well, we need a way to display those friends. So how could we do something like that? So let's say I made a section and then I just want to do a UL, and I'm going to use what's called a directive in Angular. And so for this directive, here's what we're going to do. We're going to say ng4, we'll say let friend of friends. Okay, so what it looks like JavaScript. It's not quite JavaScript. It's some special language that we use for a template language. So it looks familiar on purpose, but don't mistake this for JavaScript, okay? You do LI right here, and then I'm just gonna say friend name, just so we can see something working. So now we have the name showing up. So let me show you one more time what I did. I went a little fast there. So this NG4, this is saying repeat this thing over and over again. So repeat it. So I'm repeating this content. Then I have my LI and I have my friend.name in here. So these double curly braces, well, what is that doing? So these curly braces right here, what those are doing is saying interpolate this value of this property, show it on the screen, okay? So you can put strings in there, you can put expressions in there, put numbers, whatever you want. In this case, I'm using a friend, which is one of those individual objects from the friends array, and I'm putting it on the screen. Let's go. Looks good, but that's not what I promised you. Now, is it? Here's what I promised you. You see that? I promised you that. So let's make that. Okay, so we got our list working, but it's not in the format that we were hoping for. Let's make this nice component. So to do that, I said let's make a component. Now in the chat, I want you to type, what should I type to make a component? I want somebody to help me out because I forgot. Put it in the chat. What should I type to make a component? I need your help. I wish I knew more Star Wars so I could say, you're my only hope. Let's go. Blake coming in clean, Troy coming in clean, Richard coming in clean. I like that. I like that. Let's go. VJ coming in clean. All right. So there are a few ways to do this. So as Blake called out in the chat, NGG, then see, you can use some shortcuts, some aliases there to make it go to do less typing, right? We're developers, so we're like, yeah, I want to type as little as I can. So you can use some aliases there if you want. So I'm going to type the same thing over again, but instead of friends list, I want just a friend. Let's make that. All right, lock and load it. I am going to update this component for a friends list. Let me just update it with the final styles that we're going to use. Okay, this looks a little bit nicer, but now you see I still have my for loop like Angie called out, right? This is a for loop, right? So I still have my for loop, but now I'm using my friend component. But you might say to yourself, Mark, you typed in friend. Why does it say @friend? Well, so here's where the opinions come in a bit. This is a convention that we suggest for your components, that you do @ the name of your component. That's why it looks a little bit different. But again, this is to help you, right? And this will also help prevent collisions as well. So this is a nice little thing that you can do. We do @ and then the component we want. All right, so now if we go in, you see that friend works. That feels super good. Let me tell you what that feels good. Because this is what you're going to type anyway as you're building out your components for any language. You always say console.log, it works. We do that for you because we know where your heart is, because we care about you. Let's go. So excited. All right, let's make sure we have all of our styles set up. All right, I don't think we need any more styles here, but let's just make sure. We do have some styles. Okay, so I put my styles in already. These are all pre-done to save us time so we can focus on the actual building of this thing. Okay, now let's jump into our friend component. So I'm going to go into the component class here. Let me show you something. If you go back, let me go back one step just to show you one thing that's really important for us to know. If we look here, the friend component, from a design point of view, I'm making the decision that the friend component shouldn't care where its data came from. It should just get some data and know how to display it, right? Know how to render it. So it shouldn't know anything about my friends array. It shouldn't need to know anything. It should just say, hey, I have some friend data. I can display it. Okay, so to do that, we need to send in, we need to pass down into our component some data then. Here's how you do that in Angular. So we have to define an input on the component, and then we use these square brackets to say, hey, you see this part, this attribute right here? You see that? This is saying treat whatever is on the right side of the equal sign. Try to evaluate this. Treat this as an expression. When I say expression, that means something that's going to like give us a value once it's evaluated. So a friend is an element of this friends array. So instead of thinking it's a string, I want you to know that it's an element of that array. Okay, we're cooking. Can you smell that? Because we are cooking. Make sure that you can smell it. Smells good. Smells real good. Okay, to define that input on our component, because when we generated it, it didn't know anything about that. So to define it, we're going to do this. We're going to say input. We're going to bring in from the Angular core package, the input decorator. And here's how you use it. You do @ input, and then we'll say what it's called. We called it a friend, so we have to be consistent. Okay. Now, if we go back, there's no longer a red line here. You know why? Because even the template knew that we specified that it should take a friend, but we had implemented that. And because of the integration with the IDE, right? So we're integration with Visual Studio Code, even in the template, it knew something was wrong and it was trying to help us. Look at that energy. Let's go. The energy. All right. Now, with that being said, let's go back into our friend. Looks good. Let's go into the HTML. I am going to save us some more time, and I already have a friend template set up for us. So here's what it will look like. It's going to be an article element. We'll do H1. We take the property of the friend. So this friend is the one that's being passed in, right? We don't care where it came from. We just care that it's not undefined, right? So it's going to be passed in here. Then we do some styling to make it look nice. Speaking of styling, I'm going to go into my component style that's specifically for this component, which is another thing that we're really taking advantage of. Okay, so we're right here. These are just the styles that I set up. Now, if we go back to our app, okay, we are cooking. You hear what I'm saying? Do you hear me? We are cooking. Because now we have, from just that data and these components, everything's linked up. Now we have this half of it. If we go back to our slides, you might be saying, Mark, is this all? No, it is not. There's more. All right, here we go. Let's set up. We're going to follow a very similar pattern that we did for the friends. We're going to do a very similar thing for the messages. Listen, my attention to detail is very special, okay? That's so tender. Listen, Jay, let me tell you something. So Kindler, okay? So Kindler, it's a friend app. All right. So we go back to our IDE, and then I'm going to go right to the terminal. And we're going to say ng generate component again. And this one, we'll call it messages list. Bam, messages list is created, just so we're still on the same page. So if we go back, you can see friends list, friend, messages list. I'm going to go way back up here. This is our parent component. Okay, our parent component all the way at the top. Parent component all the way at the top. Look at this. I'm going to uncomment this. I never told anybody anything about the app messages, right? List. I didn't say anything about, but again, the integration working in your favor, okay? I think you all get that point. I'm not going to keep saying it. I get it, Mark. It's the integration. We get it. We understand. I know. I'm just so excited about it. So the messages list probably needs what? Some messages. Let's create that. So I'm going to go ahead and create. One second. Time out for a second. Shout out to Angie Jones for always telling me not to have my terminal up when it's not being used. I appreciate you. It's such a great tip. So I took that out. That way we can focus on what we're focusing on. Let's go. Eric, I can see why you say that. There's some really great things built into this that really help. Very, very similar to Rails in that way, how the scaffolding works. Very, very cool. All right, so we got messages equals, and then we have this array of messages with 5 properties. From, photo, the text of the message. Has the message been read, and is that person online or not? Now, in a dream world, this data would be pulled from a database. Maybe in a future advanced version of this talk, we could do more integration with third-party data, which is totally possible. But for this is where we're going to stop with that one, okay? Let's keep it going. Now, if I were to go into our message component styles here, let me just set that up for us. Let's just set it up. SCC, I'll do my messages. Okay, so here's how we're going to set up our messages, just like this. Then we have our app message is telling us that this message this component is not a known element. Can we fix that? How do I fix that? What should I do? Type it in the chat. Type it in the chat. How do I fix that? Right, I need to generate a component. So let's generate that component right now. So I will generate a message. Okay, feels good. Now our message is set up. So if we go back, we're closer. The messages work. That feels good, but that's not the style that we're looking for. So let's jump into this one. Now we have the same thing that we have to do. You see where it's asking us to say, hey, we can't bind like this value of this message. We can't do anything with this. Well, that means we need to go back into our component, and then we need to add the input. So let's go into the definition, and let's add that input. So we're going to import that from the Angular core package. Input. We're going to add input again. Then we're going to do message. Let's go. So now we're closer. And let's just take this, let's take it home here. So I'm going to put the styles for the messages because you can kind of see the pattern that I'm using. Here's a style that I use for the message, right? And then here is, we'll go back to the message, go back to the HTML. Let me put the template for the message. Okay. All right, now we got a message in the party. Now if we go back to our screen, there we go. Wait, did we just make that? I think we did. Let's look at the template a bit for this one, because there's some cool things I want to show you in the template for the message. Now, if you see, so we see some more of this binding idea, right? So we have the square brackets, and it's saying, hey, use the value of message.photo. Don't think it's a string message.photo. Use the value of it here. All right, same thing for the front, for the alt. Here's what I want to show you that was it looks fancier than it is. It's not really that fancy, but it looks fancy. I have an ngIf. So this is going to give me some optional rendering. Okay, optional rendering here. So I say ngIf message.online. If this evaluates to true, if that evaluates to true, then I'm going to draw this thing, this SVG on the screen. You know what this is? It's just a circle. It's that green circle that looks really nice, like they're online. That's why it looks like that. So that's how I got that little feature. But that's just the ngIf. Now, here's what's really dope. You see what Wesley doesn't have one, Denny doesn't have one. This is Denny's Finster account. This is the Finster friend. So neither one of these are online. Okay, that's because we said ngIf. So if we look at let's look at the component. There's no magic here. If we go back, excuse me, let's go back to the data so we can look what the data says. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the message list. Okay, very cool. You see, the online equals true. So for Wesley, online was false. And that's why it doesn't show. So conditional rendering. Let's go. Yo, let's go. That's so exciting. All right, folks, we did it. We built this app. We can make sure that the air is really excited. And then we can get our venture capitalist funding, because I'm taking it straight to Silicon Valley, like for real. This is going right up in there. Kindler, a place to find friends. Friend better. Oh my, I'm going to elevator and go down real quick. Hold on. I got too excited. All right. All right, so we have that. But wait, there's more. There is more to the story. What about deployment, right? Because yeah, it's really cool. It's super cool that it's, yeah, we built it on the command line, blah, 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 supercharged CLI. That's really cool so far. But what about deployment? Well, with Angular and the Angular CLI that we have, there are many deployment targets that you can have. So there are packages out there that you can deploy to GitHub pages. You can deploy to AWS. If you can think of it, somebody's probably written the package, or maybe you will be the person to write the package for it. So it's extensible like that. Remember, batteries included, but you can also put in your own batteries where you need to. Okay. We're going to deploy to Firebase. There's a really nice integration with Firebase that we're going to take advantage of. We're going to leverage that. So to do that, we're going to have to add a package. Okay, we're going to have to add a package. So the supercharged CLI is not going to fail us here. We're going to do ng add, and we'll say at Angular/Fire. So that's how we're going to reference that package. Now this is actually going to install the Angular Fire package for us. Now, as I'm setting this up, let me tell you some stuff that were done beforehand to shorten the sequence. One, I already have a Firebase account that I set up. Okay, and then I've already logged in with the Firebase stuff, right? I've already done that part, but I have not installed this stuff right now in real time. I'm installing it right now in real time for you, so you'll get to see it, okay, folks? And like I said, when it comes to the deployment, there are other options for deployment. So we're gonna get this application up onto the server. So now here's how the integration, like I said, it's a smooth integration for you. Here's why it's smooth. I just added the package and it's taking me to choose the tool that I want. Well, I want to choose the Kindler web app because I created that project before. I'm gonna hit enter. I will show you something right now. I need everyone, if you have sock fasteners, fasten your socks. All right, if you have a seatbelt on your seat, hold on to your seat, okay? Let's go, ng deploy. Gotta hit that real quick. Or the key is like that, bam, hit that wall right now. All right, so now what it's gonna do, the ng deploy is going to not only build the production version of my app. So we've been working in development, right? So it's not optimized for being on the web. It's gonna build the production version of this app for me. And then once it's done building the production and optimizing things, optimizing the language, and Minko Getchev has a really cool talk where he talks about what that looks like with the cursor and all kinds of things. If you want to get deep into the weeds, he has some talks on that. That's really great. But you know what else is really great? I'm going to put something in the chat, and I want you to click. I'm not even going to click on it. I want you to click. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it into the chat. And I want you to click on it. You tell me what you see. I saw a couple of smiles. It's up there? It's up there? For real? Let's, hold on. Bow. That's for all of you. I just gave you all the bow, bow, bow. That's for everybody else who's been waiting for their time. There you go. Let's go. So if we look at our web browser, so like this is the, I'm going to use that same URL. Let me come out of full screen. Because I want you to see what I'm typing. So I'm going to put the same thing in the browser, just like that, okay? Now, if I zoom in, it's the same app. And our venture capital firms are going to be so happy. Look how responsive this thing is. It keeps getting bigger and bigger. And look at that. The app is doing the right thing. All right, friends. Let's go. All right, so how fun was that? I had a really good time with that. Let me tell you about the power tools that we use today to build that application. Oh, wait, before I do that, there's one little small part, tiny little detail that I didn't even acknowledge on purpose until the end. Some people here have already had Angular experience, and you already know about Angular, and you're probably saying, you know what? I know the pains of Angular. I know this. I've had this bad experience. Well, let me show you something that happened. So I'm going to go to the module for our application. You never saw me open this. I never opened this file, but because of the integration with the CLI, look what it did every time. One, it imported all of my components as I created them. Then did it not only import them, it made them available to all the children of this module. So anything that was nested under my parent module got access to those components. So the value of that is, I don't know about you folks, but if you've ever built anything with another library or another tool where you have to like manually link the stuff up, I always forget to include. And I spend 20 minutes trying to remember, what did I do wrong? Like, did I type it right? Did I spell it right? Is this the right place? Yeah, so a lot of that stuff is gone away from the table. The CLI was already taking care of the stuff for you as you're doing it. So when I called it the supercharged CLI, I wasn't saying it just to like hype it up. I was saying it because look how fast I built all of this stuff out. Yes, I did pre-create the HTML and the styles, but that was for the sake of saving time. We still could have built the same amount of stuff in the same amount of time. Maybe it just wouldn't look as pretty. But you know, I was on CSS tricks all night trying to make sure that all the styles look good. All right, here are our tools that we use today. ng-new, that helped us to bootstrap our application and to create it. Then we had ng-serve. that was able to do what? Our local web server, so we can test our changes as we were making them. ng-generate, we use that to build out our components. But you know, ng-generate goes further than what I showed you. I showed you one thing, how to do a component. There's directives, there's pipes, there's services, there's so much more and other things that you can do with ng-generate. And then just to top it all off, we did ng-deploy. I deployed to Firebase to make our application live. However, you can deploy to other services. And let me tell you something, there's more to the supercharged CLI. You can add PWA support, server-side rendering support. You can search the docs for things from the CLI. You can do updates to your application. You can build, you can use testing, linting, and more. When I say this thing is supercharged, I'm not just blowing smoke, I'm being serious. The supercharged CLI to help boost your developer productivity. So where do you go from here? Knowing what you've learned today about Angular and just kind of getting your toe dipped into the water for Angular, what should you do? Well, I want you to go build some great apps. That's what you should do. Use the tools that are available to you, build some great things, and let us know about it. Thank you.
All right, great job, Mark. Thank you so much for this excellent presentation. I wanted to now give people a chance to ask you the questions, if you're ready for that.
Yes, I'm super ready. I want to say this QR code, just if you scan that, you can find like the GitHub link and other links, like how do you find me, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. So if you want to go to there, you can find more about everything from today. So yeah, but thank you all so much for having me, and we can have some questions. Yes, 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 yes. And also, can we bring Minko into the party? Because I know Minko's is going to help with the Q&A session. They're going to do a joint Q&A.
Of course, Minko, let's get you in here. So I'm going to have you also.
Hey, Ron.
Cool. Hey, Minko. Nice to see you.
Hey, it's a little bit dark here. Sorry for that.
That's okay. I'm just going to also make you co-host if you did need to share your screen for anything.
And Minko is on the Angular team at Google as well. So just so you folks know who is like, why do I want to bring in Minko? Yeah, Minko's on the Angular team. He's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant developer and engineer. So I'm glad to have him with us.
Excellent. So the first question that we have is from Chris above. It says, I'm sorry if I missed it, but does NG use Webpack?
Yeah, I can actually help with this one. I actually worked on ng deploy, so I'm familiar with the implementation. So generally, the ng commands, the ng deploy command, it pretty much invokes an external package that you have added to your project. In this particular case, it uses Angular Fire. And what the Angular Fire package deployment capabilities do is first to invoke the Webpack production build for the Angular CLI application. And right after that, using the Firebase SDK, deployed all the production assets to Firebase hosting. So there are available, as Mark mentioned already, available implementations for AWS, for Azure, for Netlify, and they share a lot of common logic. So that's pretty much how they function.
All right, we have a question from Blake. It says, one thing that I've experienced in the past was when I added functionality to components, the spec would update automatically. But then if I removed functionality, the spec wouldn't automatically remove the tests, and I would get error messages. I was using ng CLI version 8.3.23. Has that changed?
I'm going to defer to Minko on that one because I have not experienced that particular thing. Minko, do you know anything about this one?
Let me just go through the question one more time. So I'm not completely sure what does this mean. Do you mean that when you generate a new component, you're getting a new spec file, but when you remove a component, the spec file does not like get removed from the project automatically?
No, not exactly. It was the spec file would generate with the component, and it would seem to update as I added functionality to the components. Test cases would kind of auto-populate, but then if I changed the component, removed, you know, a method or something from it, the spec file wouldn't automatically reflect the change that I made to the components.
I see. So by default, we're actually not once we generate the component, we're generating a spec file, but it pretty much has like some dummy specs, some dummy tests that we just make sure they pass. When you update the functionality of the component, we usually don't update the spec file, although there are some third-party plugins which allow you to do that. But by default, we don't do this because we are not exactly sure, and we cannot be exactly sure how exactly to test your components, the functionality that you added. We're not exactly sure what this functionality is all about. For example, whether are you going to send a request over the network, what response do you expect, things like that. So since we don't understand the functionality of your component, we cannot generate the specs automatically.
Okay. Next question is, can you use the CLI to remove a component?
Mark, do you want to take this one, or I can talk about it?
You can't. I don't think you can. But go ahead, Miko. Let's let you know something more than I do. But I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, you cannot do that. Yeah, since JavaScript is very dynamic, and we cannot understand exactly where in your application you have used your component. So if we generate a component for you and you have references in 1,000 different places, we cannot be sure whether like how you're using the component. So we don't know whether we can remove it safely or not. So that's why we decided not to introduce this feature.
Right. Next question from Billy. Does Angular give us the developers control over those ng commands? Example, can I modify the build process if needed?
Yes, you totally can. You can modify all this stuff. So this stuff, and plus all stuff is open source as well. So if you need to go in and look at some examples of like how things are set up, you can do that. But you can also make changes to how the build stuff works. Yes.
Just one more thing to add. It's so modified. It's actually so flexible that a lot of folks are using the Angular CLI with other frameworks as well. There is this consultancy company called Narwhal that developed a tool called NX, which is pretty much the Angular CLI, kind of on steroids, I guess. It has support for React, for Vue, for Next.js, which is a React framework, even for Go and Python. So yeah, it's quite flexible.
That's really cool. I'd love to see some more examples of that in the future, even if you want to just share links, if that's simple enough, you know. I was going to ask you, you know, one thing that comes up quite a lot and this kind of goes back to something Blake mentioned earlier, you know, like let's say you're, you know, meeting with, you know, potential like employers or something like that. A lot of them want to see, you know, like, of course, scaffolding is really cool and being able to generate like, you know, a web project on the fly pretty quickly. But what about unit testing? You know, like what kind of, you know, patterns does Angular suggest and what kind of things are recommended?
Yeah, I'll answer first, and then I'll let Miko answer, even add more detail. But so when you generate, for example, like demo that I was showing, every time I generated a component, it generated tests with it. And we use Protractor for our tests, and Angular even supports end-to-end testing. So you can do all this type of stuff where if you can think about what your test harness should look like, you can implement that with Angular. So that's not like a limitation set by like the platform or anything like that.
All right, cool. Looks like we have somebody, Blake, I can hand you, actually, maybe somebody could answer this one, but what is ES6 and TS decorators? But if nothing else, I can help you with that too, Blake.
Yeah, I can do a quick update. So ES6, so first ES6 in general, that term, that just means like JavaScript 2015. So ES, ECMAScript, ECMAScript from 2015, so that version, that was like the big jump up from what we had been using before, right? And then so a decorator is just an annotation. So we use that @ symbol and then the name. And what that actually does is add functionality to the thing that you're associating it with. So it gave, so for example, when I did the input, I said, hey, make this variable that would be a normal variable. Let me decorate it by adding this annotation that gives it more power that way. Now it's an input into my component, and now it will know how to behave and how to work that way. And instead of me having to like bring in like a function from another file and stuff like that, like the decorators are really nice because then you can just, like I said, you can annotate that thing or that function, that variable, like I even annotated the class for component. So you can annotate all kinds of things in JavaScript and give them more functionality through that.
Right, like a decorator is kind of like another function that augments the class or function that you're using currently with ES6. So when you're creating a component, you can also decorate it with more functionality, if that makes sense. Okay. Does anybody else have questions? Because I think I have a few more that I want to ask too. So Billy asked, so it empowers the two-way binding we were used to in AngularJS 1, I suppose, version 1.
Say that again.
So in AngularJS 1, there was two-way binding. I think that was like a big thing that was hyped up. Is that still the case with current Angular?
So we don't really do two-way binding like that. So what you can do is you can have your binding that sends the values into like your component, for example, but then you can actually send values up out of your component through like the event emitter if you need to. So you have like those two ways to like send information in those two directions, but it's not the same two-way binding where then you have to do like the double colon for, only binded once or keep track like that. It's not really like that anymore. Yeah. So does that answer the question first before I say anything else about it? I don't want to confuse people.
Billy says yes.
Okay.
All right. So one thing that I saw, well, actually, this is coming from my own experience, but with React, right, which is more a library that basically creates views, you have to, use a lot of different plugins, and you have to install a lot of other dependencies too. Like if you want React Router, or if you want, if you want some of the other things that it offers, React Spring, like in Redux. There's Blake saying that. So in Angular, it seems like you don't have as much of that, but there are things like RxJS, observables and services you mentioned. Can you talk a little bit about what that is like and what all of those terms mean?
Yes, I'll start, but I definitely want Minko to jump in on this one because I think he'll have some really helpful insight. I'll start. So again, when Angular itself is a batteries included type of framework, right? So we want you to have a lot out of the box to be able to get started and be productive. So things like a router, we wanted to take care of that for you and just provide you with one that is more than just serviceable, which is a very powerful router, things like that. So there are a lot of things that just come built into the box, that, come out of the box, built into the platform for you. But when it comes to things like RxJS, I'm gonna defer to Miko on that because I think he has some really insightful things to say.
Yeah, this sounds good actually. Yeah, as Mark mentioned, we want to provide the entire stack out of the box so that you have really well integrated solution by default. And also be opinionated so that we can make sure it follows best practices. For RxJS, this comes by default, although we have different folks from community who have like different opinions about it. Some people really love the APIs and decides to take complete advantage of them and like have very compact and very expressive code, which like does a lot of things with like very elegant solutions. Other people prefer to not use that much RxJS because they find learning all the different operators that Rx provides like as an overhead. So we are not too opinionated about this. For some of the modules that we provide by default with the framework, we believe that Rx is the best way to go. And that's why we built these APIs to be reactive. So at the same time, we didn't make them take advantage of the entire feature set that Rx provides. It is kind of a minimal feature set that you can adjust to your own preferences. But yeah, RxJS is something that we can consider as a best practice since it plays really well with the like modern like reactive user interfaces.
What is the need for RxJS? That's kind of like where I get kind of like wondering about that. Like, it seems like you can do everything within Angular, but why would you need RxJS?
Yeah, well, you don't necessarily need it. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. It just creates, it just allows you to, let's say, manage state a little bit more declaratively. For example, let's say that you want to use a traditional Redux solution. That is totally fine. You can use that with Angular. With Rx, however, on top of your state, you can not only subscribe to changes, but you can also kind of transform the state over time. The same way that we map the elements from an array, the same way we can map our state and transform it to something else, for instance.
I see.
Yeah, and it has a bunch of such utilities. Let's say we want to send an HTTP request over the network. With RxJS, we can very easily retry this request or make sure that we throttle it a little bit. Just a bunch of utilities that allow you to deal with such asynchronous operations.
Okay, very cool. Does anybody else have questions so far? I'll give somebody a second to type in the chat. Mark, I'm going to go back to you. I know a lot of people are on this call because you know, you're a Googler and so are you, Miko, and so a lot of people are going to ask you know, the question, what exactly does it take to get into Google? And you know, if you are a junior dev or if you're a mid-level dev, what exactly should you be working on, especially these kind of apps that you kind of demoed? You know, I know a lot of junior developers are making apps, and even mid-level developers are kind of like learning, you know, these tools like Angular and React and redoing that. But what else does it take, you know, to kind of, you know, get noticed? Like, what would you say is really important from your own career paths?
Sure. So, so it's going to be different for everybody, and that's really important to kind of like call out immediately. It's going to be different for everybody, and for me, for example, I just happen to have been a part of a different like Google community that led to me having some introductions to some people that helped me to get the first conversation, but not to get the interview, right? So that's a different part of it, right? I just happened to know somebody who was like, hey, Mark would be a good person to talk to for this role. So the recruiter was like, hey, let me talk to Mark. So that's how, you know, because you asked about getting noticed. But then getting into Google, what should you be working on? Like, what kind of skill sets should you have? I could talk a little bit about that because I'm so like, it's still burned into my brain because of how recent it is. Like what it took me to do. I can tell you in great detail, but I'll link I did a long write-up where I'll link to, I can tell you exactly how I studied. But you know, you folks all know about like how all the FANG companies are, you know, when it comes to the interview process. So like there's a focus on data structures, algorithms, you know, problem solving. And I think that's really important to kind of have a good grasp on, especially problem solving and having like the patience to think through a problem, especially when you get stuck. So I'll tell you just a small snippet of my interview process. Like during my final interview, where it's like the big dance, you kind of go in, I can tell you that I had a problem that I got stuck on, right? Like in the middle of the problem, and it was in the middle of the day of the interview. So I was feeling good until that point. Then I get stuck on this problem. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, oh man, I blew it. Like I blew it because I got stuck. And I remember walking out of the room, you know, this room I'm in right now, and then going into the kitchen, telling my wife, the co-founder, I was like, yo, I blew it. She was like, get your head back into the game and get back in there and focus. That's what she told me. She's like, get back in there and focus. Because I'm trying not to cry, right? Because I'm like, I think I blew my shot. And she's like, go focus. And so you have to have like that mental endurance to be able to like say, okay, I'm stuck on this problem, but I know how to solve it, right? And I can acknowledge that, yes, I know how to solve it, and then I can get through it. And then again, like I said, the data structures, algorithm, that stuff is important, like problem solving. So what would I do if I were you today and you want to start practicing for an interview at Google? What would I do? Well, here's what I would do. I would definitely study DS and algorithms because those questions come up, right? But then I'd actually really spend some time practicing solving problems and practicing communicating. Because here's the really interesting thing. If you don't communicate your like solution, what does that say about the way you're going to work on the team when you work on something, right? Like if I can't count on you to communicate something complex that you're working on, how are you going to help me on the team? So like all that's really important. It's more than just being like the smartest person in the room, right? Like that's not even the whole story. It's being able to communicate. It's being able to like add value through like problem solving, communicating, and then those tactical, practical skills of solving actual coding challenge problems. Practice it. I cannot stress that enough. Go to like Eat a Bit, go to what's all, you know, all the good ones that you know about, Leak Code, all those places, Code Wars, like literally practice and give yourself some time. Like I gave myself months to practice for my interviews, right? And that's just me. This is my story, right? I gave myself months to practice, you know, and even with that, it's no guarantee that you'll get in, right? It's like, but you can't like set yourself up to feel like, oh, if I don't get into Google, I'm not good enough. That's just not the way it goes, right? Like that's just not the whole story at all. Not at all is that the whole story. it might not be a good fit, and you might find out that you don't even want to work there. Like, you don't even want to work here. So there's just like more to the story than like, oh, I got to Google and now everything is done and I'm like, you know, an amazing super robot, right? That's not even it.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
I said a lot of stuff. You know, I said it's going to be brief.
That's perfect. I just wanted to give Minko also a chance. Did you want to add anything in there, like before I go?
Yeah, I agree with everything Mark said, and specifically with the last part, like completely. I have this. Well, this happened to me in the past with some interviews actually, where I have prepared a lot and I go to the interview and like, well, it doesn't go well, so I don't get in. And after that, for months, I'm in a depression that like I'm like a bad software engineer. So the engineering interview, it just focuses on a couple of things, and like there are different variables, although at the same time, we're trying to make it as objective as possible. Well, you may not get the problem that you're the most prepared with, or you may have a day and like get the exact problems that you have practiced ahead of time. But there are different ways to get prepared and to get noticed. For example, my story was mostly through open source. I was contributing to different open source projects. Some of them ended up being used inside of Google. So the team just reached out to me, asked me whether I want to interview. After a certain period of time, I said yes. I interviewed and I was super stressed out. Super stressed out. Yeah, I was like super sweaty and nervous, and like my voice was even I was shaking a little bit. Anyway, I was not supposed to be that stressed out because it's even not healthy. But that's why I like to reiterate on the things that just like it shouldn't, you shouldn't like take it too seriously. And yeah, the interviews went fine, and I got a job finally. That was pretty much, in short, what I did.
All right.
And let me add one last small anecdote.
Sure.
Just about what Miko said about like how you can go for an interview that you would prepare for and you don't even get the job. Before an interview with Google, I had to apply for a different engineering role, and I didn't even get that job, right? And it's like,
oh wow, yeah,
I didn't even get that job. They're like, no, we're gonna pass. And so you really just can't hang your hat on like a job being like defining your self-worth, right? That's the thing you can't do. You just can't do it.
Very good, very good. I love both of those responses. They're very like great, humble responses too. And you know, it is a lot of work, you know, to just even like you know, get prepared for something like this. I think it does take a long time. A lot of the things that you know mentioned, especially lead coding and data structures and algorithms, those are things that like I see my community doing a lot too, including myself. Like I spend a lot of time doing those lead code questions. And I also like the information about open source. Is it easy for somebody to kind of learn the Angular open source? I guess like this is another transition question, but like if they wanted to kind of be involved, even at like a junior level in some way at like contributing, is that doable?
Just to add one more thing, just share it in the chat, all the problems that I solved to prepare for my Google interview.
Perfect. Oh, that's so cool.
So
Thank
yeah,
you so
if
much.
you go through these problems, the chances are that it's gonna be fine.
Perfect. I'll be sure to share that out too with the Slack and the Discord. Okay, actually, one more thing. I think we have a couple questions. And then how are you both on time? Are you okay, or do you have like hard stops, or let me know?
I think I could do a couple more questions, and then I can go. I mean, then we can go. I mean, so
Okay.
I can do a few more.
Yeah, no problem. Okay.
I want to put a post about like somebody who answered the question that you just talked about contributing to the Angular framework. Like how does it look, or the Angular platform? Here's what you can do. So I put a blog post that somebody wrote recently about that, and they wrote about their experience, right? And so you can probably check that out and see if that's helpful to kind of get a picture of what it looks like for a first-time contributor to like Angular.
Very cool. That would be really helpful because again, like I know that both getting prepared and then being able to say that you're contributing to open source, it's very difficult, I think, initially for a lot of people. But as a community and a community leader, I would love to help, you know, people have the right resources. So, you know, Mark and Minko, you're both more than welcome to continue to communicate to us in any way you like. especially if you want to send some simple messages. We have the Slack, we have the Discord. You can always reach me easily by my phone, text, whatever you think. Let's see here. I think Blake had asked one more thing. He said, can I get your thoughts on use cases for choosing Angular over another framework? It's pretty clear that the overall community is behind Vue and React. And there's some avoidance for Angular, but there are a lot more opportunities for, well, it says for React and Angular. Why should I try this? And what do you say to teams who want to consider using Angular?
So, Mark, do you want to take this one, or should I talk a little bit? And
Yeah, I'll add on after you say your part. Go ahead.
okay, yeah, I guess it depends. I don't have the same observations about Vue and React. I see that React is getting a lot of traction and it's quite popular. Our statistics are showing that, like, I'm not confident that Vue is much in front of Angular in different indicators, but at the same time, it's really hard to measure. We're looking at NPM downloads. It's hard really to get a good idea there. Number of stars. I don't know if the number of stars is an indicator. We have internal dashboards where we're tracking things thanks to like some infrastructure. And I think we're doing, I mean, I'm pretty satisfied. I recently shared some statistics about Angular since it was our 4th birthday last week of Angular, not AngularJS. So we currently have about 2,600 applications only inside of Google. And outside of Google, we have a couple of hundreds of thousands. It's much harder to give a precise number there, since many of them are behind private dashboards. And our development community is with about 1.6 million developers. So I would always want Angular to have better adoption since I have invested so much time in this product, but I'm pretty happy with what we achieved so far. For what kind of projects? So I was building startups before I joined Google. I was able to build an educational platform. I would say that if I was using actually React back then, since I started the product just when the Angular team said that they'll be working on Angular. And for sure, it wasn't the best idea to use Angular at this point, since they decided, the team decided back then that they were going to drop AngularJS, they're going to start working on Angular, and I didn't know on which boat to hop on, so I decided to go with React. I would say that Angular would have helped me to reduce the technical risk. I had to deal so many times with updates of the React router and like many other modules, and I had to assemble everything from scratch. And if I didn't have, I don't know, like 6-7 years of experience before that, I'm not sure whether the startup was going to be successful. At the same time, I'm pretty sure that anyone can be successful with like both, like with React, with Angular, with Vue, with any of the technologies out there. Usually the kind of the things that we are aiming for are to provide well-integrated development stack that comes with all the best practices built in, that you can start small and grow big and not just get stuck on the way there. Yeah, that's all I had to say.
Yeah. And it's hard to compare like frameworks directly anyway, because they're just so different. You know what I mean? There's just so many different like arguments you can go in either direction. I'll tell you what I really like. I really like to build with the thing that's like best to build with for you, right? And so you got to ask your team what, look at skills and all this kind of, so there are all kinds of factors that make it really hard to say objectively, don't use this or do use that, right? So you got to like think about it from like a broader point of view.
Very good. I think those are both excellent answers. Let's see here. Billy says that he's noticed Angular has gone hand in hand with a lot of C# development teams. The code and API seems to have some similarities that make it easy to manage a team. So, and actually, to that point, I think that's correct. I see Angular adopted more with a lot of enterprise companies, especially the ones that have been using sort of .NET or maybe a LAMP stack. Just because they're very much also, in that, they come from that world of, where everything is organized by, model view controller, or, that similar kind of design pattern. I remember actually when I first started using AngularJS 1, it made a lot of sense in the same way that, maybe a lot of these PHP backends work, where they have, services, and you have, you have all these different dependency injections and things like that. So those are things that made Angular seem very familiar. And then I think React was sort of born from the side where people wanted something more similar to, just kind of like, magical, kind of like jQuery and stuff like that. So React is more, you kind of pick and choose your own adventure. I guess some people like that, whereas some people continue to like Angular for like its inclusiveness of everything.
Just one quick comment on the article that Blake shared. Yeah, there are, it shows that Angular is 766 kilobytes compared to less than 100 for React. I don't know about React, actually. I haven't used it recently. For Angular, we built Angular to be tree shakeable. So it doesn't matter how big is our package that you install from with NPM. After the build process, we go through a variety of like optimization phases. So at the end, your bundle is much smaller compared to what you get originally from NPM. We just take the pieces, the bits and pieces of the framework that you're using, and they end up as part of your final bundle instead of like everything.
Very cool, very cool. Okay, does anybody else have any more questions? I know we've asked quite a lot, but I do want to give people a chance to just, jump in one more time and ask any questions. Okay, it looks like, our group today is pretty straightforward. I think a lot of people, are, have had some of their questions answered. I'm just kind of like looking at both screens here because I have two screens open. Essentially, I think like if you are both open to coming back, and giving more talks, we would love to have you, whenever that is. I think there's a lot that could continue to be explored, especially in the Angular. One thing that I feel like that as a group we haven't done well is we've been focused a lot on React and maybe some of the stuff that's been going on in the React world. I do actually want to have more chances for Angular and, talk about especially this concept of rapid web development. I think in this day and age, and I probably am also going to be continuing to, work with this theme, this point, but it's how do you help businesses solve their problems? Like what kind of, like if you were to stop working at Google tomorrow, but you were to be a consultant, to some other company, and you were to help them rebuild their infrastructure, in 2020, how would you go about doing that? And what are the things that you would recommend? What are sort of the, design patterns that you would implement? Why would you choose to make those decisions? So those are things that, I'd love to like continue to have as far as like future meetups, just kind of like different ideas, different suggestions, different design patterns. Those are all really fun and interesting for this group. Okay, so it says here, Troy wrote server-side rendering in Angular for a service worker. That would be a good meetup. I think that would be great. Actually, I had service workers on here. And, I had seen a Google talk about service workers. So I did actually wanted to know about that. But if anybody wants, if Minko or Mark wants to talk about that for a second, you're more than welcome to. But other than that, that could be also another good meetup topic in the future.
Yeah, we could explore that. I mean, sure, we could explore doing a future talk or something like that. Miko, if you want to talk about this right now, that's fine too. But we can also do it in the future talk.
Yeah, to use the Angular service worker, you just run ng-add Angular/p.way and you get the service worker, and it's already pre-configured for you. It takes care of pre-caching, and you also get actually some Angular specific APIs if you want to, but you don't have to do anything else if you don't want to use any, to configure it for more advanced use cases. I just sent the comment in the chat. You can, yeah, you can give it a try. You can experiment with it.
Is there a, you know, like a framework coming out similar to like Next.js for Angular?
Generally, we think of our CLI as, I think so generally the problems that Next.js solves for, still I'm commenting as a third-party person since I know the folks from Next.js and I'm really close friends with both Guillermo and Tim. From my understanding, they are trying to make React more opinionated so that the server-side rendering, so first, React applications like are very fast by default, thanks to server-side rendering and pre-rendering. And also they can optimize the server-side rendering story for different serving platforms, in particular Vercel or Vercel. We believe that like Angular by default comes opinionated enough. So we have been enforcing this with the Angular CLI by default. We didn't have pre-rendering solution. We didn't have actually static site generator until recently, which is more like Gatsby. So I would say that we're covering the Next.js use case with the Angular CLI and universal array. We didn't have static site generator, which is something like Gatsby for Angular until recently. Now the community built Scully, so you can give it a try on scully.io. Hope this answered the question.
Yeah, definitely. And then one last question, actually, because this just came to the top of my head. But so in addition to JavaScript, right? You know, sometimes I think like a lot of the recruiters or people who are, you know, asking about your skills, they'll ask you like, I guess like my question is how important is, you know, some of the other languages like knowing Python or Java, you know, in addition to JavaScript and Angular, like how important is that for, you know, getting into these kind of fan companies, especially Google? Would you say there's an emphasis on that as well?
Should I talk about this one?
Yeah, go ahead, Miko, because I don't know what I think yet.
Okay. Generally, I think it's a good idea to invest in different paradigms so that you can open your minds to like different ways of thinking. For example, if you understand languages, like more imperative languages, such as like JavaScript or Java well enough, that's great. You can look into something like Haskell next or ClojureScript so that you can look into more, although JavaScript is functional, by default, we're not using recursion everywhere. We usually have mutable state, and with different constructs, we have more of an imperative language there. So knowing Haskell and let's say Scala and such functional languages are just going to help you just grow as a software engineer, in my opinion. Still, that's just a personal opinion. In Google, you wouldn't have to deal with, you just need one language for your interviews, that's it. But some of the problems that you may get on an interview, let's say dynamic programming, they're really well suited for more, let's say, recursive solutions. If you want to implement a top-down approach and you have caching and so on and so forth. Right. If you know Haskell and you know how to solve a particular problem in Haskell, this could be really helpful for your interview. Just the more you know, the better. Just like diversify.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, I think Netflix had asked about that one time, like when I was talking to them. So they were just kind of like saying, we want to be able to see that you have more than just JavaScript experience as well. We want to know if you have Python and Java. So that just kind of came back to my head, and just thinking about that too. All right, yeah, I think I've asked quite a lot of questions. I really respect and am very appreciative of you both, your time. Thank you again, Mark, for this excellent intro to Angular, and just kind of like think that in the future, you're both, Mark, you said to me, like, would I have you back? Of course I would. I think like, yeah, of course. You're an excellent, I love your energy. I love like the enthusiasm you bring to these talks. So I think that's really special. So yeah, anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome to. We'd love to have you here. At this point, I would say if nobody has any more questions, then feel free to just drop your LinkedIn. You know, if you want to like connect with anybody here. I also dropped in links for our Slack and our Discord a little bit above. So if you want to go and join us there on Slack and Discord, you can. I know some people don't know what Discord is, no problem. So like if you are a Slack person, you can use Slack. If you want to use Discord, you can use Discord. Our website is there too. And then this video, I get this question almost every time, but yes, we always record our videos and then we put them up on youtube.com/JavaScriptLA. So if you want to get there and watch the video later, you can. And if you have any questions, again, about me or this group or anything like that, feel free to reach out to me via the channels that I just mentioned. But yeah, I'm going to give it back to you both, Miko, Mark. Any last thoughts, things you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just say thank you so much for having me. I had a blast today. I'm still like buzzing with the energy. It was amazing to be here with you folks. Thank you to Miko for coming in for the Q&A with me and supporting. Amazing. Thanks to all you folks who took some time on a Saturday morning to hang out. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you want to find me online to interact with me, I'm always on Twitter, probably more than I should be. And you can find me at Mark Texan. I'll put it in the chat. So please, I love connecting with people and interacting. If you got questions, reach out.
Very awesome.
Yeah, it was great to be here. Thank you very much for having me for the Q&A session. And thank you, Mark, for the great talk. Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I'm also in social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, and also over email. That's where you can just ping me.
All right, cool. I'm gonna make sure I get all these links out to everybody. I know somebody was like, oh wait, don't close the channel when you're done. So I do keep the copy of the text chat too, and if there's anything that's really important, especially all these links, I'll make sure that they get pushed out to our chat channels and all that. So, all right, thank you so much. Great job, round of applause. If you wanna clap, in the chat, totally fine. Thank you all for coming, and like I said, there are more meetups. Just real quick, share my screen just so I can show you that. But it would be at JavaScriptLA, and you just want to go there. We have one more meetup this month. Then that will be on the no server data visualization, build a bar chart. So be sure to go and check that out. And yeah, if you have any other questions, just feel free to reach out. We're at javascriptla.net. Thank you again for everybody who came. And we'll see you at the next meetup. All right. Bye all.
Bye.
Thank you.